The rain had started without warning, the kind that blurred the street and softened the world. Claire Bennett noticed it while washing a mug in her kitchen sink. The sky had turned gray earlier than usual, and the air felt heavy like it was holding its breath. She lived alone in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland, a place where people waved but rarely asked questions. It suited her. After years of noise and disappointment, silence felt safer. She dried her hands and walked toward the front window. Across the street, headlights moved slowly, tires whispering over wet pavement. That was when she saw him. Ethan Miller stood near the edge of the sidewalk, looking at the houses like he wasn't sure which one belonged to him. He had moved in next door a few weeks earlier. Claire remembered the moving truck, the stacked boxes, the polite nod he gave when she introduced herself. They had spoken only in passing. Still, she recognized him instantly. He looked different tonight. Not rushed, not distracted. Just still. Claire watched as he checked his phone, then slipped it back into his pocket. The rain grew heavier, soaking his jacket. For a moment, he seemed to consider walking away. Something about that pause made her chest tighten. She told herself it wasn't her business. She had learned that lesson before, yet her feet moved anyway. When she opened the door, the sound of the rain rushed in. Ethan turned, surprised. His expression shifted from confusion to relief in a single breath. "Hey," he said. "Hi," Claire replied. Her voice sounded calmer than she felt. "It's really coming down. Do you want to wait it out inside?" He hesitated, just for a second. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said. "It's no trouble." That was all it took. He stepped forward, wiping his shoes on the mat, and entered her home. The door closed behind him with a quiet click. Sealing them inside from the storm, the house smelled like clean wood and warm tea. Claire's home was simple but cared for. Soft light filled the space, casting gentle shadows. Ethan glanced around, respectful, like he was stepping into something important. "Thanks," he said again. Claire nodded and walked toward the kitchen. "I was just making tea." "That sounds perfect." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. Steam rose from their cups. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, steady and patient. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Claire noticed his hands, strong but careful. He noticed the quiet way she held herself, like someone who had learned not to take up too much space. "So," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "how long have you lived here?" "Almost 10 years," she answered. "Longer than I planned." He smiled. "I know that feeling." Their conversation moved easily after that. They talked about work, about the town, about how strange it felt to start over somewhere new. Ethan explained that he had left Seattle after a job change and a life that no longer felt right. Claire listened closely, not interrupting, not judging. When it was her turn, she spoke honestly, but briefly. She mentioned her divorce without bitterness. She talked about learning how to be alone without being lonely, even though some nights were harder than others. Time passed quickly. The rain softened, then slowed. Neither of them noticed right away. Claire felt something she hadn't expected. Comfort. Not excitement or nerves, but a quiet ease. She didn't feel like she had to explain herself. Ethan didn't try to impress her. He simply was . At one point, he laughed at something she said, and the sound surprised her. It had been a long time since she made someone laugh without trying. "You have a good laugh," she said before she could stop herself. He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" "Yes," she said, smiling. "Definitely." The moment lingered. Something unspoken passed between them, light but real. Eventually, Ethan glanced at the window. "Looks like the rain stopped." Claire followed his gaze. The street glistened under the porch lights. Storm had moved on, leaving the air fresh and cool. "I should probably head out," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Of course," she replied, standing. A small part of her wished he wouldn't go, and that thought surprised her even more than the feeling itself. They walked to the door together. The house felt quieter now, like it was already missing him. "Thanks for letting me come in," Ethan said. "I didn't expect any of this." "Neither did I," Claire admitted. They stood there, close enough to feel each other's presence, far enough to respect the space between them. The silence stretched, not awkward, just full. "I'm glad I knocked," he said. She met his eyes. "Me too." He stepped outside, then turned back. "Maybe I'll see you around." "I live next door," she said gently. "So I hope so." He smiled, genuine and warm, then walked away. Claire closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it had all evening. She didn't understand why such a simple moment felt so important. All she knew was that something had shifted. She walked back to the kitchen, noticing his empty chair. The tea had gone cold. Outside, the street was quiet again. That night, as Claire prepared for bed, she replayed the evening in her mind. Nothing dramatic had happened. No promises were made. No lines were crossed. Yet she felt changed. Across the wall in the house next door, Ethan sat on his couch, still wearing his jacket. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about the warmth of her home, the sound of her voice, the way she looked at him like he mattered. Neither of them slept easily. Neither of them knew that. One simple invitation had started something they would not be able to ignore, and this was only the beginning. The days after the rain felt brighter, even when the sky stayed gray. Claire noticed it the next morning while making coffee. The house felt different, like it was holding a memory. She shook off the thought and went about her routine, but her mind kept drifting next door. Ethan was already outside when she stepped onto her porch. He was fixing the loose latch on his gate, focused, unaware of her at first. When he looked up and saw her, his face lit with a quiet smile. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. There was a pause, small but full. Then he gestured toward the gate. "I didn't realize how many little things were broken until I moved in." "New places always hide surprises," Claire said. They talked for a few minutes, easy and relaxed. When they parted, Claire felt lighter. The rest of her day moved faster than usual, as if time itself had picked up speed. That evening, she found a note tucked under her door. It was simple, written in careful handwriting. "If you're free tomorrow, would you like to walk by the river?" Claire read it twice. Her heart beat harder than she expected. She told herself not to overthink it. She wrote back yes and slid the note under his door before she could change her mind. They met the next afternoon. The river trail was calm, lined with tall trees and fallen leaves. They walked side by side, hands brushing now and then, not by plan but by chance. Conversation flowed easily. They shared stories about childhood, about moments that shaped them, about mistakes they learned from. Ethan spoke about leaving a long relationship that had faded slowly, quietly, until staying felt heavier than leaving. Claire listened without judgment. When she shared her own past, she didn't hide the hurt. But she didn't let it control the story either. They stopped at a bench overlooking the water. The river moved steadily, never rushing, never stopping. "I like how calm this place is," Ethan said. Claire nodded. "To remind you that things keep going." He looked at her then, really looked. "Do you have a way of making things feel steady?" The words stayed with her long after they walked home. Days turned into a rhythm. Morning greetings, evening talks. Shared meals that were never planned but always welcomed. The connection grew naturally, without pressure. Still, Claire felt fear creeping in during quiet moments. She had learned how quickly hope could turn into loss. One night, she almost pulled away. She told herself it would be safer to stop before feelings grew deeper. But the next morning, when she saw Ethan waiting by his fence, coffee in hand, smiling like seeing her was the best part of his day, she couldn't bring herself to step back. Instead, she stepped closer. They attended a small-town event together, blending easily into the crowd. Friends noticed. Some smiled knowingly. Others asked gentle questions. Claire felt exposed but also proud. It's like she was standing in the open after years of hiding. Later that week, Ethan invited her to his place for dinner. She hesitated only a moment before saying yes. His house was still half unpacked but warm. He had cooked carefully, focused on making everything just right. They laughed when something burned slightly, and he apologized more than necessary. "You don't have to be perfect," Claire said softly. "I know," he replied. "I just want this to matter." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. After dinner, they sat on the couch talking late into the night. The space between them felt smaller, charged with feeling but guided by care. When Ethan reached for her hand, he did it slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The touch was simple, steady, full of meaning. Claire realized then that attraction didn't have to be loud to be strong. Still, doubt found its way in. One afternoon, Claire received a call from her ex, unexpected and brief. The past stirred feelings she thought were settled. That evening, she was quiet, distant. Ethan noticed. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. Then she sighed. "I'm just afraid of losing what I've worked so hard to rebuild." He listened, really listened. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said. "I just want to be honest about how I feel." The words settled her, not erased the fear, but eased it. Weeks passed, autumn deepened, leaves fell. Their bond strengthened through shared moments, not big gestures, but small truths. Grocery shopping, late night. Talks, comfortable silence. One evening, Claire stood at her window again, watching the streetlights glow. Ethan was on her porch, knocking softly. When she opened the door, he looked serious. "I've been offered a position back in Seattle," he said. "It's a good opportunity, but I haven't given them an answer." Her heart sank. The room felt suddenly smaller. "I didn't want to decide without talking to you," he continued. "You mattered to me." Claire felt torn between fear and hope. Part of her wanted to tell him to go, to choose the safe path. Another part wanted to ask him to stay. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped aside and invited him in, the same way she had on that rainy night. The meaning was different now, deeper. They talked for hours, weighing possibilities, sharing fears, speaking openly. No promises were demanded. No pressure placed in the quiet that followed. Claire understood something important. Love didn't mean holding someone back. It meant standing honestly beside them. "You should choose what feels right," she said finally, "whether that includes me or not." Ethan reached for her hands. "I wanted to include you," he said, "but I want it to be real." Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the truth of the moment. Days later, Ethan made his choice. He stayed. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still worries, still doubts, still moments of uncertainty. But there was also trust growing slowly, carefully. One evening, months later, Claire and Ethan stood in her doorway, watching another gentle rain begin to fall. She smiled. "Funny how everything started with a storm." He smiled back. An open door. Claire leaned into him, feeling steady, present, hopeful. She knew now that inviting him in hadn't just changed her life. It had reminded her that some risks are worth taking, and some doors, once opened, lead exactly where you're meant to be.